Hi folks, I'm Alan Wharton. This is Cutting Through the Matrix on June the 5th, 2016. I did a talk fairly recently about when governments come out to disclose something or admit to something, when they have to, that is, when they can get out of it, and how they'll never tell the truth. That's not just any government, it's all governments really. That's just the standard technique. Because all governments, from the top right through the civil service right to the bottom, their job is to tell the public as little as possible at all times. And if something does leak out that causes any kind of fuss or whatever, lie about it. And if it's just to the individual citizen, you'll just lie to them, for instance. And if it's a group of people, then and you have to admit to something, admit to a little bit, but then spin it heavily to take the blame off yourselves in government. And they all do this. Every government's the same, every government's the same. I was looking, for instance, at nuclear accidents, and which are inevitable, really. But I was looking at the one in Chernobyl and rewatching an old documentary I have here on what happened there. And it's very similar to other nuclear accidents that have been in the world, where the first comments or statements that come out of the companies that own the nuclear industry, they come out and will tell you not to worry, it'll be contained, etc., etc. And they lie, right down to altering safe emissions. You can't believe anything you're told, to be honest with you. It's that bad. You cannot believe anything they tell you. They'll always tell you, well, they have to tell the public things, or you get panic, you see. So to safeguard government, and that's what it is, it's government, period, because the first thing they'll tell you within government is we must keep the confidence of the public. We must keep that. Anything which tarnishes it has a long-lasting effect, you see. So whatever you do, don't really admit to anything. If you have to admit to anything, then it's not really the government's fault, etc., or the government itself was misled, that kind of stuff, you see. You know something, this is what you used to see in children's stories when you're young. You'd see them not to tell a lie, little moral stories and so on. Don't tell a lie. And they give you little plays and all that stuff, what happens in the play if you tell a lie, and the consequences to yourself and others. It's a pity that they don't teach this stuff to governments, isn't it? But that's the way they are. And big business is the same. Big corporate business is just the same. It's never their fault, you see. And no matter what happens. And today's news isn't really news at all, because everything is so heavily spun and controlled with damage control. And a lot of stuff is put out there too, you don't know if it's true or not. Because the governments are so in bed, and always have been in bed with the newspapers, and the big corporate owners and so on. As an essential part of controlling people is controlling all information. You must have the support of the newspapers for things to work, you see. And all reporters know too that their little privileges, like getting invited into courtrooms and getting invited into parliament buildings for debates and so on, they'll be withdrawn. Little tips from government will be withdrawn if they publish a true story on any kind of scandal or corruption or whatever. And that's the way it really is, you see. It's a shame too that people will, and understand it and why they do, but people will tend to not sacrifice their income and their career in order to get ahead in life, as a saying, to get ahead, to get a name, and to have some degree of recognition and have a good, comfortable lifestyle. It's rather sad. And as long as we're like that, I guess we'll always have these problems. When you hear stories like the one I'm going to talk about, very briefly in fact, which admits to something the government's overseen and it's gone wrong or whatever, You don't know whether to believe it or not, because remember, too, news is also put out there sometimes to affect the public in some other way, or to even put someone up as a new hero they're going to use down the road as a high person in politics, or even the head of a country. In other words, you make him the kind of hero of the people, you see. And what's turned out here in Canada, here's a story here. And it's a story. That's what they call them, stories. Children tell stories too. But again, we're given stories, but we're not given truth. And in the news, I've gone through this before legally, went all the way to the Supreme Court in the US, for instance, that news does not have to ever, there's nothing about putting out news that has to give out the truth. You see, it's not called the truth, it's called news. And news is anything, even gossip or opinions or whatever. So that's what it's new. It's new to your ears. So that's it. Anyway, the Federal Spy Agency in Canada here. It says, now here's a wording too. Inadvertently shared logs of Canadians' phone calls and internet exchanges with intelligence allies, such as the United States, for years, a newly disclosed report says. Now, number one, this is the best you've got, right? Supposedly. Do you really believe they didn't know? I mean, come on. Inadvertently shared logs of Canadians' phone calls and internet exchanges with intelligence allies, such as the US, for years. And it says the revelation about the Communication Security Establishment, that's what they call the CSE here, compromised Canadians' privacy while sharing clandestinely captured data, appears in a confidential watchdog's report obtained by, and they give the different papers that are involved and all that, looking at it. But it says they get it from court filings initially related to a lawsuit against the Canadian government. The report said software that's supposed to remove identifying information from Canadian material captured by the CSE. In air, as they say, it's in the air, you see all this metadata. They just captured it. It's supposed to scrub off, revealing who's sending what, you see. Which is nonsense. We know it's nonsense because how many stories have we read over the past years of the fact that they know everything about everybody and they're getting all the data, not just the metadata. Oh, we know who sent this and where it's going to, but we don't know the content. Come off it. Come off it. Come on. So is this a real story? Is it another confusing thing to mislead the people, thinking you're still being kept in privacy? Come on. Come on. Anyway, it says here, it says the 2015 report puts in sharper focus as spy agencies' struggles to protect Canadians from foreign threats, right, while also safeguarding their privacy. First revealed January, and this is by the Defence Minister, Harjit Sajjan, and CSE officials. Or is it a story here, you see, to boost it into the portfolio for this Defence Minister, Harjit Sajjan, who rumours have it that he's going to be a future Prime Minister down the road. This is how you get the public ready to vote for someone, you see, down the road. Anyway, it says the report was written by a retired Quebec judge who heads the office of the CSE Commissioner, who is the watchdog agency. Well, how can it be a watchdog agency? And how much money did they get and all that if they don't notice? They don't notice what's been happening all these years. Oh, come on. Do you believe that? Do you really believe that? Come on. But that's what they hand out to us, eh? That kind of rubbish. And it says that in it, he suggests that unlawful seepage of Canadians' phone and internet records to foreign intelligence agencies could go back to the mid-2000s. Or they were doing it long before that. And that the overall amount of compromised material is unclear. Anyway, it says, so this commissioner is urging Parliament to pass laws spelling out how it wants the spy agency to function. Well, the laws are already there, huh? But they've been getting ignored, it seems. The laws are there. So why would you pass out laws that are already there? Anyway, it says the CSC's collection posture has strengthened. Oh, that's who wrote this? The volume of metadata collected has increased considerably, he says, and he urged the federal politicians to give clearer direction on surveillance. Well, how clear can it be? Anyway, it says in 2014, the CSE, that's this agency, it's kind of like NSA, but it's affiliated with it actually. It could be the same darn thing for all we'll ever know. It suspended sharing both sorts of records when it realised its automated system had failed to scrub out what it calls the Canadian identifying information. So they're trying to say that for years, maybe for 10 years, they hadn't noticed this. Come on, for goodness sake, eh? Anyway, it says the CSE is part of the world's most powerful spying alliance. Since World War II, 1940s, the Five Eyes, electronic espionage agencies in the US, in the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. That's actually more now. Even Israel is part of it now. I was reading a while back there. As we have been working closely together, the collective members cannot eavesdrop on their own citizens. What a joke. What a joke. I've read so many articles over the past years on that very thing happening. Ugh. But their governments have relaxed their rules covering telecommunication trails, such as metadata, in the hopes it could help the Five Eyes track Al-Qaeda terrorists. What a joke. It says metadata collected and shared on a massive scale can show intelligence analysts who is talking to who, even when the contents of the underlying conversation are unknown. There's no agency involved in spying ever stopped to just finding out who's talking to who, but they don't know what they're talking about. Come off it. Oh, yoy. Anyway, in 2001, Parliament in Canada passed a law which gave the CSE increased abilities to collect the data, subject to orders from defence ministers to spell out what it can and cannot do. And but they've just noticed that didn't follow the rules on giving all the data, basically, but with phone numbers and all the rest of it, to these allies. What a joke. So this is a non-story, really. And I'll tell you, most folk won't care about the story because they don't think it really hits them directly for most folk. So it's really doing what? It's giving the impression the government's doing what you think they're supposed to do, and find out where it's flawed and got holes and all the rest of it. And it also raises this hardship up to a state that's going to keep you in the mind of the voters in the future. And the more stories they can get involved, this fella, with, the more that's how they push somebody up there into the public mindset, basically. So he's on the ball sort of thing, and he's on your side, you see. It says, but the CSC can't guarantee it can avoid capturing Canadian telecommunication trials. Wednesday, it says, Scott Miller attested to this fact in federal court proceeding related to the lawsuit. He said that while CSC does sometimes collect metadata on Canadians, this is a very rare occurrence. Now, what is very rare? I mean, see, we have no proof of anything as in the public, you understand? And we're given no proof of anything. And it says the CSC collects metadata. How they do it is a state secret. But it's known that it's gathered in huge volumes indiscriminately. So there you go. This goes on and on and on. But again, it's kind of a non-story because it won't bother most folk whether they're collecting it or not, and not nowadays. And the laws were already there of what they were supposed to do and what they weren't supposed to do. Then you jump to this little story here. And it says that the government denies watering down coal power phase-out. This is in Britain. And it talks about the government's being forced to deny its watering down its pledge to phase out unabated coal power plants by 2025. after the energy minister suggested there could be leeway in the definition of unabated. You see, this is all legalities. They pick a word and they pick it to death, of course, which is an old trick. And say, well, it's not actually breaking this law, or it is breaking this law, but let's define it. And if that doesn't work, let's redefine it, what it means. It's like the Constitution in the US. They keep redefining what this means and that means, and the Bill of Rights. That's what lawyers are for, you know. It says here, unabated coal is widely understood to mean any. Well, I see this. There you go. Widely understood, but by whom, right? Which means any plants that are not fitted with carbon capture and storage technology, which captures the harmful emissions that cause, and they say, global warming. One volcano, if we cut out all the carbon and CO2 and all the rest of it, which would mean killing us all off, by the way, because if we breathe the darn stuff out, then the plants would all die off too. You know, if you simply banned everything, which is madness. That's why when you see madness, there's other reasons behind it all. There's somebody else going to benefit massively, but it's mainly for total control of the way each person across the planet is going to live. But it says here, I love how they word it, which captures the harmful emissions that cause global warming, they say, is for the carbon, for permanent burial. You think it's like a human being, permanent burial, you know. Because there's big money we made off conology here. Big money, of course, it's the con men that designed it all. It says, but minutes of a coal industry meeting with Andrea Leadsom, the energy minister for Britain, I guess, record that she encouraged the industry to engage in forthcoming consultation. And I'll put these links up tonight on the 2025 closure plans, including on the question of what is unabated coal. Now, the whole, you have no idea how many things have signed down to be phased out by the year 2025, which isn't far off now, folks. And 2030, and then after that another bunch of things for 2040, 45, and so on. It goes on and on. Never-ending story, folks, you see. Totalitarianism and chronology is never-ending, you see. But anyway, it says the speculation that consultation could see the commitment watered down was further compounded with a White House source when they said, they were quoted in the Independent news. They were saying the consultation would consider whether coal could carry on burning if it was partially abated, filtered and so on, stored. And it says the Department of Energy and Climate Change. It's just amazing. You've got an official Department of Climate Change now. Eh? There's some politicians been made minister of climate change and so on, and he's the god of the air and everything, eh? Just like the ancients talked about it. You know, the god Ra was the god of the air, everything basically. And the same thing with Osiris and so on. Everything that crawled on the earth, flew, dug underneath the ground, worms, everything belongs to the Pharaoh, you see. Everything. And they're back at it again, aren't they? But using chronology and pretend and fudge science to make it all so. Quite something. Remember what Plato said, whatever's been made to happen in the past, the public have accepted and altered, it's been altered their behavior in the way of living. If you understand the sequence of how you introduce it step by step, you can introduce it again. You see? And they'll go along with it again. All this time they use pretended sciences and so on, you see. And the scientists, so many of them are, oh my God, they're really rolling the money now with massive grants for putting out this stuff. If you think science is completely independent from all politics, well, forget it. When you're living on nothing but grants, folks, you're one of the most politicized groups out there. You'll see whatever your master wants you to say for a big fat paycheck that you wouldn't get as an ordinary scientist with all this hype. But now they're going to save the world. Oh, we need science to tell us what to do. Before weathermen and so on were a dime a dozen, nobody cared. But there you go. Now remember that almost every year, I try to make it every year, when I remember that thousands of folk die in Britain, in their homes, mainly pensioners, old age pensioners, every year from freezing to death because they don't have enough coal or fuel subsidies, you see. Government's involved in every aspect of their lives already over there, totally socialist controlled. And socialism is just a handy term for total control, that's all. It doesn't matter what particular flavour tyranny has, it's all the same methodology and goals they're after, you see. So here they are, talking about phasing out coal. One of the fastest, easiest fuels to get out, basically. You don't have to worry about meltdowns and nuclear fission and all the rest of it, and millions dying down the road from radiation poisoning. Nothing like that. But it's been decided at a much higher level, you see, that no, you've got to cut back on fuel, period. Understand there's depopulation also at work here. You better understand that all you countries who haven't phased it all out yet, you see, a lot of these things out yet, are in for the same thing as Britain. Yeah. So you or your parents or somebody is going to freeze to death because they can't afford the fuel. Any kind of fuel, basically. It's so expensive. They come into a place near you. And plus, too, it's meant to get folk out of rural areas, you see. Because I say it's unsustainable to pipe what's remaining as gas and everything else into to the rural areas. So we'll have to put it into cities only. It's all worked out years before you ever heard about Agenda 21, the Millennium Project, now 2030. It's all the same agenda ongoing, you see. Step by step, getting you to admit, to accept, adapt and accept one little bit of the plan after another till you're totally immersed in a whole new way of living. And most people will submerge themselves into it without a thought, without even the ability to look back and say, I wonder what it was like a few years back, because they can't remember. They honestly can't remember. Just simply adapt. Yep. So remember, Agenda 21, 2030, Millennium Project, get them off the land, crowd them into the cities, and then you start with the control over every aspect, food, rationing, everything coming into play, fuel of all kinds coming into play as the economy goes down and down and down and down, you see. It's planned that way. Why do you think all the biggest corporations are on board with it? You think they were the last ones to get on board with something that's going to dip into any kind of company's profits and so on. But nope. Because the big lobby groups will be able to use their particular type of fuel. It cuts out other kinds, so they have a complete monopoly over fuel, basically. That's what you use. See, if you're big, a big corporation or international corporation, you use the governments to fulfill your policies, for your profits, etc. Eliminate competition is one of them. That's written in stone with them, unfortunately. There's no such thing as fair play in business. It doesn't work. It's a nice idea, but it just simply doesn't work, especially in the US. It doesn't work. It's cutthroat. And dirty tricks galore. Always has been, though. But yeah, eliminate all competition, and then you control everything, basically, in that area. And it's a science. Easy done. Simple formulas. And government's only too willing to comply with the big demands of the corporate lobbyists. Now, I think it was last week, just over that, there was the G7 meeting, the Group of Seven meeting in Japan. And all the top countries went, of course. And they discussed, again, nuclear fuel and all the rest of it, and cutting back and all the rest of it. All that kind of stuff again. The message is just repetitive. You may remember that 7 years ago, Obama eventually was awarded a Peace Prize for declaring, again in Japan, a trip to Japan, that he would push to eliminate nuclear weaponry. And now, of course, the Japanese are admonishing him for refurbishing and updating all this nuclear weaponry in the US. It's just amazing, isn't it, the nonsense we see for these guys looking for brownie points and then going the way of their big lobby groups and so on. But anyway, he's talking about, or in Japan, he's telling the world that, again, we've got to cut back on nuclear fuel, for giving us power and all that kind of thing too, while he updates the arsenal for the US. Quite something. Everything's a bit of a joke, isn't it really? Hey? And to show you how Agenda 21, 2030, whatever they want to call it now, to confuse you, of course, and throw you off the trail, we're already getting penalised in rural areas for the cost of living, in lots of areas of living. Everything's more expensive in the north here, Ontario, and there's no reason for it really. There really isn't any reason for it at all. But anyway, it says here, the residents of Whitefish, Ontario, that's Greater Sudbury, not far from me, Whitefish, they were getting a big protest across to part of the electric system here, Hydro One they call it, which again it's got a strange license. I think if it's partly government or it's all government, and I don't know. It used to be, at one time we had a different system altogether, and we had decent rates, but then they privatised a part of it and it went through the roof. Anyway, it says the protesters gathered outside one of the Hydro One offices to stop the protesting the sell-off of Hydro One. They say that it will drive the rates up, and they want to halt rate increases resulting from lower than expected consumption. And this is what they tell you. You see, if you've had all this stuff about use less this and less that, so the folks comply, or have less children. Oh, there's not enough for you. We're going to have mass immigration from all over the planet. And you think it's just accidental. No, it's not. There's reasons behind everything. And then don't use so much water, don't use so much electricity, etc. So if you don't use a lot of electricity and you comply, you see, and then we have to put the rates up. We have to charge you more because we expected more profit last winter, but you weren't using that much. So you can't win. You can't win. So anyway, it's not meant that you win. And then it says here, too, to stop billing rural customers for line loss charges and to end the ill-conceived smart meter program without passing on costs to customers. Hydro One is taking a lot of her money, Chartern said. She's, again, one of the leaders of the protest, I guess. The rates have gone right through the roof to the point where seniors especially are feeling the crunch of this. And she's part of a Facebook group called Hydro One Enough is Enough. And they've got more than 27,000 members, and they've had protests in several cities across Ontario. And they've had a protest at Queen's Park where the provincial government is too, kind of like a state government for those in the US, where they met with Minister of Energy Bob Chiarelli. Anyway, the delivery charges for electricity are higher than usage in some cases. So just getting it, just for the privilege of having it delivered in that line coming in your house, the cost for having it is always the same because it's independent of the current you're actually using. That's extra, you see. And it says that's unacceptable. The delivery rate and the hydro rate is more than our mortgage, more than the mortgage. It's pushing seniors out of their homes and putting them into seniors' homes where the government is getting all of their money. By the way, that's what they do. They copied the British system, you see. And by the way, that's what Obama's and his boys are all going to be doing. The guys that pressured Obama, at least anyway, the big lobby groups, because believe you me, what a fantastic boom they're going to have in grabbing all the homes, the older folk, you see, and then all their offspring say, oh my God, they're leaving nothing to us. Well, that's the plan, folks. The government's going to grab it all and sell off your home. Well, it's going to cost us a lot of money putting grandpa in there. It might only live 3 months, doesn't matter. They grab your home and they sell it. They keep all the cash. That's the system in Britain. That's the one introduced into Ontario. Bob Bray's government did that. I agree, another socialist, of course. I love how socialists always help their big capitalist buddies. It's quite funny. Anyway, it says here, much of the city is served by Greater Sudbury Utilities, but about 30,000 residential customers in Sudbury buy electricity from Hydro One. And they would get a better deal from the local distribution company. Of course they would, but again, big business is big international monopoly, and they will not have any competition. They will put competition under, including the folk at the top of it, any way, and I mean any way they can. That's how things really, really work, folks. And that's just how it goes. And that ties in with this story here. Outdated rule may force Quebec City, an elderly guy, to sell his house for his wife's care in the hospital, you see. So it says Neil Batterton's waiting to find out if he will have to sell his house to pay for his wife's care in a public long-term residence. His wife, Muriel, has Alzheimer's, and Batterton, 71, was her caregiver for nearly 6 years until he was diagnosed with cancer. So he's got cancer and his wife's got Alzheimer's. He was forced to enroll his wife in a long-term care institution known by its French acronym CHSLD after his daughter told him he was putting his own health at risk. And he says he cried for days, even weeks, when he took the final decision. He said up to the last minute he hesitated, but the couple doesn't qualify for financial help from the government to pay for the costs of long-term care. And Batterton says he can't afford to pay for the costs on his own. He says, they're forcing me to impoverish myself, he said. I don't have a choice. Doesn't make sense. The Battertons have a combined monthly income of about $2,000 drawn from their public security and pension plans. It costs him roughly $1,008 a month for Muriel's care in the facility. In spite of their modest income, however, the couple doesn't qualify for financial help. That's because the Provincial Public Health Insurance Agency, REMQ, stipulates that individuals with more than $2,500 in liquid assets are not eligible for financial aid to offset the costs of long-term care. And that rate was fixed, by the way, in 1983. And it hasn't changed. Even the cost of living is way up yonder, and the dollar's worth less and less and less and less as they print more money or paper. Doesn't make any sense because he doesn't have large incomes, says Judith Gagnon, who heads the Quebec Association for the Defense of the Rights of Retired and Pre-Retired People. Anyway, the Quebec Ombudsman released a report 2014 that described REMQ's guidelines as lacking a consideration of the human aspects of placing someone in long-term care. There's a lot of work to do, he said. Kyle says, we have to get back to 2016. And it's just amazing. Well, that's what happens, you see. You know, in the papers, you have all this great PR for the politicians. Their names are always mentioned, the folk involved, but bringing in immigrants with no money and from third world countries by, as many as they can, and throwing money and yada, yada, and all they do to get them settled in and housed, etc. Blah, 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 blah. But the folk that have been living here, once you're here, folks, believe me, once you're here, it's just awful what they can do, isn't it? And this story should be as big as the immigrants coming in, not just to what's happened to this fellow and his wife, but to lots of folk across the whole country. It really is amazing how we can just throw billions in all the wrong directions, but you won't spend it at home. we all know that the nuclear fuel is a problem when it's used up because they don't know how to dispose of it. And something that lasts about 500,000 years is not something you can just bury and hope you forget about it, because someone in the future might just dig it up by mistake, not know it's there. And you get fault lines in the earth, etc., where they bury this stuff deep. And they crack, and leaks happen. There's so many documentaries out there about the barrels that they dumped into the sea off England and different places, and radiation levels have just been increasing, and the stuff's getting washed up onto beaches and so on. So anyway, it's really a crazy system as to use at least the present system of nuclear power. It's just crazy. And here's to do with Fukushima too. 600 tons of melted radioactive Fukushima fuel is still not found, the cleanup chief reveals. We don't even know if we're up in the air, that stuff, or what, But they say they hope to locate and start removing, so they know where it is. So if you don't know where it is, how can you just locate it? And start removing the missing fuel from 2021, it says. And the fuel extraction technology is yet to be elaborated upon, he added. I guess you can try to find where it's scattered across the whole planet and start adding it up. I don't know how you'd do that with a weighing machine or something. It says, following the tsunami which caused 2011 meltdown at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, uranium fuel of 3 power generating reactors gained critical temperature and burnt through the respective reactor pressure vessels, concentrating somewhere on the lower levels of the station currently filled with water. And it goes through what happened in a blow-by-blow account, basically. But the official estimates that approximately 200 tons of the nuclear fuel debris lies within each unit, which makes in total about 600 tons of melted fuel mixed up with metal construction elements, concrete, and whatever else was down there. It's 5 years after the tragedy. They still haven't stopped all the leaks, by the way. They don't know how to do it. It says the exact location of the highly radioactive runaway fuel remains a mystery for TEPCO, the company that runs it. But you understand, I see, you'll never get told the truth on big screw-ups. You'll never get told the truth. As I mentioned already, the documentary I was watching on the Ukraine talked about this incredible makeshift techniques to try to dampen the damage that was done on the plant, that plant and that went up. And they used thousands of volunteers to drop sandbags and things like that, thousands of them. And they brought 500,000 of, I think, army volunteers and different volunteers, and even mining volunteers. And before these guys, they're all in their 20s pretty well. Before they hit 40, I think 250,000 of the 500,000 were gone or dead. Even though the government admits that, but they'll only admit that 4 died because of the accident. It's quite something how they can play games like that, isn't it? Isn't it something? But and they're still having children born over there with all this. Actually, the same kind of genetic malformation you saw with thalidomide, because you can really change the genetic structure through chemicals or radiation, as we well know. And these young children look just like the thalidomide children of the 60s, whenever it was. But it's just, they can't even send their robots in Fukushima, same as it did with the Ukraine tragedy, because the radiation literally screws up all their electronics completely. Yeah. Gets through everything. But the guys in Russia, I mean, you got to say God bless them, because those guys all gave their lives to try and stop it spreading, and more and more folk getting contaminated. It's tragic. But of course, when you're young, you don't think you're going to die anyway. It's the same as, and that's the army, that's what happens. Otherwise, you'd never join up. If you started recruiting nothing but, say, 40, 50-year-olds, they would join up. Which would be pretty good, then they wouldn't be killing each other on behalf of big corporations and governments. But that's just the way it goes, isn't it? Now, to say that's what happened at Fukushima here. They've lost all this stuff. They don't know where it is. They've lost so much of stuff into the air. It's spread across the world pretty well. And it's spread across, even the one in Ukraine spread across a good part of Europe. Gorbachev, on the documentary I saw, who was the president at the time of the Soviet countries, he said that, it could have rendered Europe uninhabitable. If it had a second explosion, that's what would have happened, he said. And that was backed up by another so-called expert at the top there as well. It floated across Sweden, contaminated there, into Norway, down south, all the way to France. They didn't put a word out about it, by the way. Into Spain, across the Channel, through Britain. The only thing Britain ever did was to tell them to try and avoid drinking milk for a week, like that stuff that's got a half-life of 500,000 years, but just when it falls in the grass, just don't drink milk for a week. But they treat you like morons, don't they? Don't they? Really, they do. Come on, let's admit it. Let's all admit it, eh? It's like trying to humour some, again, senile person. Let's pretend they're all senile, the general population, and tell them children's stories. Like, don't worry about it. The experts are managing it fine. There's nothing to worry about, Meanwhile, they and their relatives and children, if they have any children, down the road will be deformed and dying of cancers and all that. Why not just tell the truth? Wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where truth was actually spoken about? Not selected truth on anything, but truth in all areas, eh? Not just agendas, because they can make agendas sound awfully truthful by excluding all other parts of their story, you see, which can contradict what they're trying to push. So, real truth. Wouldn't that be really nice, eh? Wouldn't that be nice? But that'll never happen, eh? Pie in the sky. It's kind of like what Machiavelli said, because he wrote, like many of them, like Francis Bacon did too. They wrote for kings and princes, and basically like a resume, showing how clever they were for as an advisor if they would just take them on. So that they would give you these little anecdotes of how to manage the people, the mob, how to confuse them, lie to them, use them, and all the rest of it. How to increase taxes without them noticing. All these things were done long ago. Nothing's new. But he's talking about craftiness in business, you see, and things like that. But he says, everyone who understands how laudable it is for a prince to keep his word and live with integrity and not with cunning. Nonetheless, experiences show that nowadays those princes who accomplish great things have had little respect for keeping their word and have known how to confuse men's minds with cunning. In the end, they have overcome those who preferred honesty. There you go, eh? Has anything changed, folks? It's actually worse now because they've got all these sciences to do how they scientifically confuse the general public through neuroscience and all the rest of it, and the massive marketing companies that have sciences all within themselves that know us from A to Z, basically. Quite something. But that's what you get, isn't it? We get told to play and be happy and don't look at anything negative, especially anything that might kill you or deform you or something, but or turn you into something that looks like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Just happy and watch television. That's what we're told all through our lives. That's how you've all been trained. You see, Ignore the negative. Anything that you should know that could be dangerous is called negative. So don't look at that. It makes you unhappy. It's so simple, isn't it, to manage the people with the sciences that they have today. And with the nonsensical medias where they train you and teach you, they tell you the truth. Come on, eh? Come on. Now here's the thing, when they start reducing any options on power, you see, then you have a monopoly with the gas industry, say, for heating yourself and so on. So that's when they shoot up in price. We got it, you want it, pay what we demand, that kind of thing, you see. And if there's no competition, that will definitely happen. So you'll have a cartel running all the gas industry. If it's not there already, I'm sure it probably well is, natural gas and so on. And then again, they can't run the natural gas into the countrysides. They'll say, oh, it isn't feasible and blah, 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 you see. But they can run it into cities. Again, you're going to get pushed into cities. They want you off the roads. It's been made quite plain by the push to not get rid of your automobiles too by, but 2025 or something. And it's all planned. See, the future's always planned. You think you're your own person and you're free. You're brainwashed. You think that you're free. They keep telling you that. But if you're really free, you could make your own choices on things. Well, they say, well, you can still make your own choices. I mean, we're not stopping you living in the country. You just can't heat yourself, you see. You can't do that. You can't heat yourself. And you can't travel to any cities to get groceries or anything. No, because you won't have a car. Quite simple. You're coerced into everything that's been planned for you. Everything. You're coerced into it. Forced, in other words. You understand, they want a tidy world map with no urban sprawl and rural sprawl all scattered. No, they want us all stuck in the same places, you see. It's all planned. It was planned before I was born. I've seen all maps of it too, from the big boys. And boys up at the top who've mingled and are in the same class, basically, as that elite ruling group, old families. Put this in their novels, and various, like George Orwell, who controls the past, controls the future. Because you see, if you're living in the present, which a second from then, as soon as you've said it, is now the past, then those who shape all the policies and so on, and the culture, your culture is always getting reshaped all the time to suit those who rule and who control and who own, you see, everything, including you and countries, nations. They're always getting you ready of how to see things. Don't see things naturally, they tell you, How do you look upon it? Look at it this way. Well, what is wrong with the way that you were looking at it? No, they'll say, look at it this way, you see. So that's the first thing they do. Then they'll teach the children to look at it this way until they can't think of it any other way. They think it's all quite natural, no matter what kind of ridiculous system it is. So those who control the past always shape everything in that period when it is the present to be the future which they design to suit themselves. I've mentioned all this before, years and years ago. An archive session at cutting3dmatrix.com is full of my investigations and all this kind of stuff. And who controls the present controls the past. Because those who control the present are always having the proper new historians in every generation to rewrite the history. And every time it's rewritten, it omits an awful lot of awfully important stuff. And it changes things too, in other ways as well. I've got books from many generations, and it's just astonishing how so many chunks of it is just gone now. You can't find it. And other parts, things either never happened or didn't happen the way it said at the time. I mean, it's quite something to see how it's already been done. So George Orwell wasn't simply making stuff up. He was talking about it the way he knew it was already done and had been done long before he came along too. You have to remember too that so much of your indoctrination, as I've mentioned over and over for years, is from fiction. Your firewall is down. The mind has no firewall. Remember that? And so you're being entertained. Why should your firewall be up? It's put out there for you to have fun with, right? And bingo, all the embedded politically correct updates are just boom, banged out there, and you just soak them up. Over and over and over and over again until you'll start parroting it yourself. You will. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. You will. Yeah. And that's how it really works. It's so simple, isn't it? So simple. And people have, as Russell said, Bertrand Russell, and others who worked in the big associations and think tanks, who gave us and drafted up and wrote about the changes that would happen from the 1930s to the present time. Everything from fashion to everything to promiscuity would all be push, blip, incrementally, right to the present time and beyond, in fact. He said that we shall train them to listen only to experts, not so they can't think for themselves. They won't trust themselves. They'll always listen to an expert, even if their own common sense already had a diagnosis on something, say. They'll say, I think that's that. But along comes the expert and says, no, and it confuses them, and they'll listen to the expert. And everything, that's how it works, you see. So he said, we'll train them so they can only do things by the advice from experts, on the advice from experts. And he said that their government will tell them they're free, and their government will keep telling them that they live in the best country in the world. And that's exactly what you hear. Oh, it's still the best country in the world. Doesn't matter what country it is. Oh, it's still the best. You're the best healthcare. You're the best this. You're best. That's what they keep telling you. And you're brought up to believe it all. Why shouldn't you? I mean, no one grabs you as a child and says, "Hey, whatever happens in this world, hang on to your brain," because they want it. No one tells you that. So you're unsuspicious. Why should you? Why should you be kind of paranoid about things? Why should you be? Why should you be paranoid about things? Your parents might not be, probably aren't, because they've swallowed their indoctrination and they start passing on to you. As soon as you can understand mama and dada, That's how it works. And then school takes over, as I say. And then you're indoctrinated very fast. Repeat after me, repeat after me, repeat after. Don't think, repeat after me. Now getting back to nuclear energy and so on. Yep, it's deadly stuff. Deadly. But remember this, as I say, monopolies are already planned, which monopolies are already planned and decided who are going to control everything. And I'm sure they're giving their stacks of their bribes out too, because that's how things also work. To make sure everybody of import goes along with things, And as I say, when there's no competition, you're at their mercy. That goes for anything. There are countries now that are at the mercy of Monsanto and all these other companies. I think Monsanto's now absorbed by another company, but so they say anyway. But remember that these companies hold nations to ransom when they have got all the farmers using their modified seed, and they have to go back every year to get this stuff. They can't just save the seed. It belongs to the company through patents. They can't use that seed again. And they have killer terminator genes in it, and so they can't do that. Whereas before, farmers were, and had the ability to be, independent and totally self-sufficient. So nations now are. So when you do the same thing, you do it with your food. The meat packers have got all the meat rigging up that they want, because they run it all. The meat packers are a combine, Not the producers of the meat and beef and pork and so on, but the meat packers are. They're the boys that do it. Very small combine for the whole of of North America, basically. Quite something. So there's your vegetables, there's your meat, and now you get your power. Same thing, you see. Remember that it always happened. So many movies for a long time where, there can only be one. The hero is always one. You're the one. Yep. The Highlander. It can only be one. Everybody else gets annihilated, you see, till there's one. And you all lap that up, not realizing the esoteric meaning behind it too. Of the guy sitting laughing in the big business suits at the top. But that's how it works, you see. And you don't realize that when choices are really taken away, is serious stuff. Very, very serious stuff. And then when they take away gasoline, then you can't go long, long distances in the country from one place to the next, or one city to the next. Control, 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 control. Because your little electric car, if you could even afford the darn thing, never mind the upkeep of constantly replacing the parts or the motors and all the batteries and yada yada yada, because they don't last long. Or they'll go on fire just by charging it. The heat's just enormous. But it certainly won't go long distances. Isn't that handy for controllers too? The first thing controllers do is limit travel. And you need all your permits. You must stay in your own little authorized area. Isn't that how it works? But you put under the guise of, to save you all, it has to be this way, to save you, or the world will end. They give up step by step, like Machiavelli said, use cunning. They use cunning. And they do it today through the scientists, behaviorists, psychologists, neuroscientists, and so on and so on and so on. From Hamish myself from Ontario, Canada, where it's pouring rain right now. It's good night, and your God or your gods go with you.